Aloha aina, aloha kako. I am Janos Samu, and as a national, I represent the Kingdom of Hawaii government, the Hawaiian Independence Alliance, and also the American Friends Service Committee, in other words, the Quakers. First of all, I would like to thank you for flying the flag of Hawaiian independence, solidarity, and sovereignty, or displaying or wearing its symbol. Please continue to do so. You all remember the false missile alarm last January when you were scared out of your pants that North Korean missiles are on their way towards us. As we were told, it turned out to be a human mistake. Somebody pushed the wrong button. This was the official explanation. Or some higher authorities were just testing how the population would react to such an alert. Maybe we will never learn the truth. But the question is real. Should we really be afraid of North Korea? Here are my thoughts. During his current trip to Hanoi, US President Donald Trump failed to make any meaningful progress with North Korea. This was an expected outcome of the recent summit, but not for the reasons the mainstream media wants you to believe. The so-called summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Hanoi this week was a predictable flop. According to the US president himself, he ended up walking away from the summit because, as he said, it was all about sanctions. Basically, they wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety, and we couldn't do that, he stated. But he never said why. It wasn't exactly so, since little could be achieved between these two nations because of the core issues at stake here. According to leading hysterical voices in Washington, there were risks involved, and the peace declaration was one of the two main risks of the Hanoi summit, unless the US received irreversible concessions in return. Please don't take us for a fool. Where in the world is a peace declaration a risk, even if there are no concessions made in return? And what does that even mean? If peace is declared, that is a concession in itself, isn't it? Oh, but we need to ensure that North Korea dismantles and eradicates all of its nuclear weapons and delivery systems first, before we can even possibly discuss peace. Where have we heard all of this before? It seems as though that we have already tried these strategies several times with varying degrees of ruination. Most famously, the US tried to convince the world that Iraq needed to disarm its non-existent nuclear weapons, only to get increasingly impatient when Iraq couldn't do the literally impossible, and the US reduced the country to rubble. The same also took place in Libya, a nation which previously had the highest standard of living out of any country in Africa. In fact, North Korea cites Libya as an example of why it will never give up its nuclear weapons supply. If you dig deeply enough, you will even find proof that the US and the UK actually gave Libya a script indicating what the North African nation needed to do and say in order to rehabilitate itself into global community. And just a few years later, Barack Obama and his NATO cohorts were bombing Libya. Speaking of concessions, even irreversible concessions, it is actually now quite well documented that North Korea would make huge concessions in rolling back its nuclear program, but on one condition. As MIT professor Noam Chomsky once explained, the reason is that in return the United States should put an end to threatening military maneuvers on North Korea's borders, which happened to include, under Trump, sending of nuclear-capable B-52s flying right near the border. Maybe Americans don't remember very well. Chomsky also stated, but North Koreans have a memory of not too long ago when North Korea was absolutely flattened, literally. by American bombing. There was literally no targets left. Just so we are clear, Chomsky is not exaggerating that last point in the slightest. Still, North Korea would never attack us unless the US attacks them first. Their nuclear weapons are a deterrent only for their own protection. Why are they having a US-North Korea summit anyway? What exactly is the threat that North Korea has clearly proven to us? That it fires missiles into the sea on occasion? I fear for the fish and the environment, but as far as international human rights conventions are concerned, which, as we know, the US government loves to pride itself on its ability to attack other nations for a lack of upholding. North Korea's so-called rogue behavior barely even pales in comparison to that of the United States. It pays to remind ourselves that if we are going to hold North Korea to these ridiculous standards, that it has in fact conducted no nuclear or intercontinental ballistic missile tests since 2017. The US, on the other hand, is still assisting Israel in its destruction of Gaza, is still assisting Saudi Arabia in its destruction of Yemen, is still bombing the rest of the Middle East into oblivion, and is currently threatening war against Venezuela, Iran, all the while reigniting a new and revamped Cold War with Russia and China, just to name a few. And even now, two supposed US allies who do have known and ready nuclear weapons appear to be throwing stones at each other. Yet denuclearization seems to be nowhere to be found in media when we examine the history of the ongoing conflict between India and Pakistan. So it is not exactly the North Korean that you have to fear, but the trigger-happy US generals. Thank you, everyone. Mahalo.